For more on Chinese investment in Brazil, Eric Farnsworth joined me. He's the Vice President of the Council of Americas here in Washington, D.C., and I asked him who stands to benefit most from all these deals.
Brazil, in particular, needs massive amounts of investment in infrastructure. China has not just the investment capital, but as China's own economy slows, they also have the expertise and the excess capacity that they have to begin to find other markets and outlets for. And so there's really a marriage of convenience here, and I think it explains a lot of the business deals. You know, China's overall approach to Latin America, as we've seen developing over the last decade, really has been focused on commercial activities and investment activities. That's been primarily based, as we've talked about, on commodities, but as the commodities markets slow, now there is a broadening of interest too to direct foreign investment and to other activities, and we're seeing that play out as well in Premier Lee's trip to Brazil and to South America.
A lot of people don't realize this, but China is the leading trading partner for Brazil.
Correct.
And it's not just commodities, it's also goods, it's also some services as well. And I wonder if that's perhaps the model that pro-Chinese folks would say, this is the model that the rest of Latin America could adopt. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, I think several countries in Latin America already are adopting that model, particularly the commodities exporters. China is not just Brazil's top trade partner, it's also the top trade partner of Chile. It's the first or second trade partner of Peru, depending on the month. It's the second trade partner of Argentina. You go down the list. And so there's a lot of interest in that type of model. But there are questions here. And it's not just the pure exchange of goods, because with trade also comes the need for investment. And the question then becomes, what are the conditions under which those investments are made? What are the implications? Who gets hired and under what conditions, and things like that. And so China, as it continues to move into the Western Hemisphere, is going up the knowledge curve, learning how to be an investor in Latin America. It's not the same as Asia. There are different conditions, different expectations. And so this is something that as the two regions get to know each other better, we're going to start seeing some differences as well.
There's no question that investment and money is welcomed, no matter which country you're from. Mm-hmm. But my experience is that it's not always just about the money. You have some cultural differences that have to be adjusted over time, and that you can overcome it. And some countries do, and some countries don't. What's going to be the hurdle, you think, for Chinese firms trying to do business in places like Brazil, where some of them already have a history of it?
That's exactly right. I mean, money is welcome. The question is, under what conditions does the money come in? One of the things that Chinese investors have had to face is the whole idea of hiring of labor. In the past, we've seen examples of Chinese companies come in and create jobs, but they create jobs for Chinese workers who are actually imported into the region. That really rubs the locals the wrong way, if we can use that
Sure.
Expression. What they want is jobs, but they want jobs for their own people. They want jobs from, Brazilians filling jobs. And so what we've seen in this trip of Premier Lee is actually a very interesting and clear pronouncement that many of the jobs that are created are specifically going to be for Brazilians in Brazil.
Which is what Brazil wanted.
Which is exactly what Brazil wanted, and not just in terms of job creation, but also in terms of developing capacity for products. So, for example, Brazil has very strong provisions for local content requirements. If you're going to manufacture something, it has to have a certain percentage of local content. That has some other implications in terms of competitiveness, those types of things. But those are issues that China is going to have to deal with and address, and is learning how to operate effectively in those markets.
What's next for this relationship between China, Latin America, Brazil? I know Premier Lee's going to be onto some other countries, but what's the next step in this relationship?
Well, that's right. It's a continuing relationship. We saw in January in Beijing, President Xi Jinping announced $250 billion of investment for Latin America over the next 10 years. This Premier Lee visit is consistent with that. I would anticipate that the relationship will continue to develop along the same lines, primarily economically. But let's also be clear, not all of the pronouncements that Chinese government officials have made when they come to Latin America end up coming true. So, for example, some of the promises that have been made for investments or trade, if you look back and see what has actually developed, hasn't always been fully manifested. So we have to watch that carefully too. Are the promises that are being made, will they be kept? Because if they're not, then you begin to build cynicism and distrust, and I don't think that's the direction that anybody particularly wants to go.